as we are here, again, our priority, of course, is to say thank you. As Pastor mentioned, this has been one of the churches that has been very encouraging to us. As we show on the slide, this is your ministry that we are a part of in Peru. And so your support, prayers, and financial is principal. It is what we are here to be very thankful for. And as, I don't know how difficult it is for you, but as we visit church to church, we don't have ability to memorize all the names and faces of all the people we meet. Some of you may not know who we are. Some of you may remember us from the past visits. So we'll be giving a brief summary of who we are, what we're doing, and hopefully leave some time for some questions. So as you can see here, we are your missionaries, and we are also grandparents. Seems like there's something about grandchildren when they produce, they're magnets, but nevertheless. So, but our children, again, many of you may remember from our times in the past, our children are now grown. Jason and Lisa are missionaries in Romania and serving the Lord there, just finished their first year. And then Willie and Hannah are the parents of our grandchildren. So we are blessed and thankful that the Lord has allowed our children to serve Him and be faithful. As we share our ministry, again, a lot of changes, a lot of things went on during COVID, during the pandemic. And as we were sharing, we don't know again if you know, but we ended up coming back to the States at the height of COVID. Iquitos was one of the worst hit places in the world at the height of the pandemic. And medical attention was not all that abundant, so we made a decision, came back to the States, and as we shared in our prayer letters, we felt it was okay to go back. We had to renew our passports because they were taken from us as we came back. And that, we paid for the expedited process, and it only took 9 months. So we were away from Iquitos a little longer than anticipated. We went back, found some changes. Many of the missionaries had to evacuate. We discovered there was a mall being constructed. As we share, again, I just give you the picture. Iquitos is the largest city in the world that is isolated. So you can't get there by land, air, and water. And so a mall being constructed is a big thing for us. But the longest bridge in Peru was also constructed during our time. Iquitos is home to the longest bridge in Peru. We were converting this morning. It's 2.2 kilometers, which for those of you non-metric, that's 1 1/3 miles. So it's a nice long bridge. And I'm going to be showing you the view, a little bit about, so you can see the bridge, see some of what we see out there in the jungle. But you need to pay attention, because there will be some test questions following the video. Oh, wrong button. So I don't know what you noticed watching the video. The song we were playing with it is talking about a bridge to cross the Great Divide, as well as that bridge is a cross to bridge the Great Divide. But as we think of evangelism and giving people understanding of Christ being that bridge, you don't usually contemplate the other side of that bridge being a dead end. But if you noticed on that bridge, it wasn't what you expected when we reached the other side. When you think of a bridge, what is the purpose of a bridge? Is it to connect or to divide? Maybe it's a transition, or as we like to stop on that bridge and look around, time for contemplation. Does a bridge improve or degrade society? Does it unite or separate? Help or hinder? Even the idea of a bridge becoming a dead end. What is the purpose? So as we share our ministry and what is the purpose of what we're doing in Peru, one of the things that obviously we're mainly a part of is a Bible Institute. Bible Institute as a building was built in the late 40s of the previous millennium, century, what have you. And we continue to work there, keep it up, have programs, and we'll share more of that. But with the idea of what you saw crossing the bridge, I don't know if you noticed some changes. It wasn't really obvious, but I actually was combining a couple of different videos that I took. And at one point, the river was a little lower than the other. Again, the Amazon River is quite interesting. Where we are in Iquitos, the annual change from low to high, right now there's concern that some of the rivers might come up a little. Well, the Amazon River there at Iquitos every year goes through roughly a 45-foot cycle. It has, in the past, been closer to a 50-foot change from low to high, and that's just every year. So that's what people there living deal with. The bridge was constructed to deal with that. Some other changes that we'll point out, but again, Institute building as a facility, after being there for almost 70 years, more than 70, it has gone through some changes. Our time there has been the last 12 years, and we've been involved in a lot of maintenance just to be able to keep the facility going. Its location is strategic, but its age has become somewhat of a detriment. We continue to seek to have an impact through the location, but again, the upkeep has become quite time-consuming. So the reason for it is to train and teach up leaders, future pastors, and we're realizing that that could be done in a different format. And so as you pray for us, the next term that we return to will probably be a time of transition for the facilities there. The ministry that we have, it's not all studies. We do have one day a year that we try to have some fun activities. It's nice to show some of our students doing things, helps build teamwork. We can find spiritual applications in almost any activity, how to work together. And as I may not have mentioned, but it does rain in Iquitos quite regularly, and usually more than here. So whenever we have these activities, we have to plan for potential for indoor and outdoor activities. And as I mentioned, the principal reason there for studies, and I will let Virgie share more of. No? Okay.
I don't know. I'll just do it without microphone. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Everybody in back can hear me? Good. The library, which you see here on the left, is where I usually spend most of my days. The classes are always at night. We have classes that begin at 6 in the evening and they go till 10:30 at night. The library opens at 4. So if I'm not teaching a class, then that's where I am from 4 till 10:30, or sometimes even 11 when the students decide that they're ready to head home. So that's where my ministry is. I'm doing the librarian, bookkeeping, mentoring, counseling, shoulder to cry on when the students are struggling through classes or other home life situations. A couple of times a month we have a chapel service, a special time, giving students opportunities to be able to share, have practice in sharing God's Word. And we always celebrate the birthdays for that month for the students, just as a special thing for them. And some of the students have even told me that it's the first time that anyone's ever actually celebrated their birthday and given them as kind of a spotlight. So it's just a way to really encourage the students.
As far as teaching and in the classrooms, during the year we'll have several classes that we try to emphasize with local churches. Try to encourage more people to come. This is one of those. So as you can see, we have maybe more students than typical. Our average attendance for the first 2 years worth of classes is about 15. And then as we move into the third and fourth year, it drops down to maybe around 10. So we teach a variety of courses. Both Virgie and I are involved in teaching Bible survey, theology, special books, and it's just a privilege. Again, this is one of our classes that I teach on evangelism, and the students are able to learn. And one of our graduates shared that after graduating and taking what he'd learned at the Institute to his church, it was definitely a help to him in his ministry. So some of our students are a great encouragement to us as they continue in ministry. We have taught classes on Daily Vacation Bible School, and then in this set of pictures, the students actually go out while they're taking that class and hold Daily Vacation Bible School in locations, maybe in church or a plaza, one of the city plazas, to get into practice. On the left is a church that we attend most of the time while we're there. They just celebrated their 90th anniversary. So the gospel has been there in Iquitos for a while, and the Institute has had a part in many of the churches. On the right, young man, Saul, or Saul as we would say in English. He's close to graduating, but hadn't it been for the pandemic, he would have graduated by now. Again, being an encouragement, very involved in his local church, and just helps us understand what God is doing and makes it worth it. There's another opportunity to get part of one of our chapel services. The students take part in preaching for practice. Again, pay close attention to what you hear from him as we observe the background. Probably should have had a little bit more volume to give you the real flavor, but he was sharing in chapel during one of our typical thunder and rainstorms, and was pretty much speaking at the top of his voice, and rather difficult to hear. But that's what they're going to be used to. Most of the churches have tin roofs, and when it rains, it is noisy. On the left, on the back, a couple, very, very helpful to the Institute. Pastor Jairo and his wife, Natalie, help us with teaching. They both have taught courses. In fact, in our absence, This past week was the first week of the new school year. Again, being in South America, the school years are kind of opposite of ours. We just started last week, and Pastor Jairo and Natalie are helping more than normal in our absence to keep things running. The guy in the front, named Roosevelt, he is very involved with the deaf ministry that is across the street from the Institute. Started by APW missionaries, and now Roosevelt and his wife are heading that up, and he's studying at the Institute. The guy in the front on the right is Pastor Juan. He's the pastor of that church I mentioned that celebrated 90 years of anniversary. And another one of our teachers and his family is, we have several local pastors that help us, very much of an encouragement. Now let Virgie share some more.
No activity in Peru is complete without food, kind of like Baptist churches in the United States. So every time we do have an activity, there's always has to be lunch served or something. This particular meal is a chicken in a cream sauce served over sliced potatoes with rice on the side. And all meals have to include rice, no matter what it is that you're serving, whether it's spaghetti or whether it's fried chicken and French fries, you still have to have rice. So they do consume a lot of rice. The gal on the right helping me is Wendy. She's one of our co-workers there in Peru, married to a second generation missionary there in Iquitos. This little gal on the left, her name is Deborah Virgie. Her mother is there on the right, holding her granddaughter. But when Catherine took classes with me, she decided that when they found out they were having a little girl, that she would be named after me. So they named her Deborah Virgie, but she goes by Virgie. So it's an interesting, a different name for Peru. They're not used to names like that. So, but she's just a delight to watch her grow up, and now that family has the next generation as well. So we praise the Lord for their continued involvement in ministry. I often get involved with ladies groups and meetings. This particular church, you notice the tin roof and the open area in the back. So you can imagine what it's like during the rainstorms, but they enjoy the fellowship and special times together. The gal on the picture on the right, who's wearing a burgundy skirt there, she's actually one of our graduates. I hadn't seen her for about 3 or 4 years, and so it was really special when I got to be at this church about 4 months ago. It's more than that now. About 6 months ago, and be able to see that she's still involved in ministry and continuing to serve the Lord using the things that she learned at the Bible Institute. The ladies love to get together and play volleyball. Soccer is the sport in Peru, but the ladies usually enjoy volleyball more, and they love to come out and cheer on their teams and enjoy fellowship together in that way as well. In October, I was asked if I would teach a class for the ladies on how to make cookies. For some of these ladies, it was the first time they'd ever made cookies, and so it was a fun time to be able to get together just to enjoy fellowship together. It started out, it was supposed to be just for pastors' wives, time of encouragement. Word kind of spread, and so we ended up with about 45 ladies from various churches there. And they enjoyed the cookies afterwards, so they were a success. The next month in November, our co-worker Carol was asked if she would teach how to make donuts. And so Carol asked me if I would come and help her. And she ended up with close to 50 ladies in the house trying to make donuts. So that was definitely a fun afternoon. About 3 times a year, all of the ladies from all of the different churches get together and have special meetings. And they always have to have games involved. That's just part of culture. In this particular game on the right, it was a quiz game, and if you didn't answer the question correctly, then you got to be loved on with these wonderful foam hands that were covered with baby powder.
Back to our bridge motif. Don't know if you noticed some of the contrasts as I showed the journey on the way out. Toward the dead end, we got to see some of the pictures showing the Amazon River, more of jungle, and then as on the return, the last end of the video, coming back toward the city, big Iquitos with city life, and those are just one of the contrasts. As we consider Peru, there are contrasts of culture, areas of education, health. Again, being out on the river is often you will find a small boat with maybe a family trying their best to get from an outlying area into the city of Iquitos for someone maybe that got bit by a snake or injured, work-related injury, just hoping to get to Iquitos in time to save a life. So healthcare is again a contrast. The ideas of schedule and time. There's a term called hora peruana. The idea is, it's, when you get there, when you get there. But for instance, if we schedule a meeting at, for instance, like our Sunday school hour, starting at 10, you announce that it's going to start at 10, well, as far as they're concerned, as long as the hour still says 10, meaning they could be there at 10:59 and they're on time. So we try to work with that and say, well, then the meeting will start at 9:59. Contrast in social, political, again, many of you may have seen in the news, Peru has made the news of late, some unrest. From our perspective, as far as we can tell, yes, there's a little bit more than normal unrest happening, but it's rather localized. As far as we know, it is not affecting any of our missionaries or ministries that ABWE has in Peru, but we're keeping an eye on it. So just again, a variety of contrasts that we encounter and deal with. Give you a few pictures to give you the idea of contrast in climate. This is on the coast. The coast of Peru is desert, and then out in the middle of the country where we are is jungle. So that's a bit of a contrast. Just a reminder, when our first 10 years of ministry, we worked on the coast, a fishing community on the north coast. This just brings memories to us. Some of you may remember our earlier visits. Speaking of culture, just a reminder that Peru, before it was the country of Peru, the Inca Empire was in its heyday about the same time that Columbus was sailing the oceans blue. Just give you an idea of the history. The Inca Empire was on the rise, and then the Spanish conquered. So our culture is a combination of the Spanish influence over the Inca Empire, and just makes for some interesting culture as well as some interesting places to visit. If you wanted to come visit us, Peru has one of the natural wonders of the world in the Amazon River, as well as one of the man-made wonders of the world in Machu Picchu. But again, as we look out on the river and see a variety of transportation modes, tourism is one of the attractions that keeps the culture and the climate going. As you think about tourism, going to see various places, as I mentioned, the river goes up and down considerably. And so when the water is low, you will have access to some of these places through these very, very much OSHA-approved walkways. They only last for a year, so they don't seem to be too concerned about quality. When it comes to cuisine, Peru has actually won some international competitions in their cuisine. On the left, one of our favorite dishes called lomo saltado. It's similar to a stir fry, but served over rice, even with the French fries. I showed the picture on the right just because Coca-Cola, now you can find it globally. It's all over the world, and everywhere that we know of, except Peru, that Coca-Cola has gone, they've just outsold the local drinks and have eliminated them. They were not able to do that in Peru. The Peruvian soft drink, Inca Cola, was not able to be eliminated by Coca-Cola, so they had to actually buy it out and produce it. Just an interesting bit of trivia about the culture of Peru. One of the other hats that I wear, besides being the director of the Institute, taking care of maintenance, ABWE has been developing over the last 15 or more years a discipleship, evangelism, material, and program. Our key books that we have some on our display table over in the church. But the Story of Hope, which is key for evangelism, the way to joy, key for discipleship. I'm actually South American Spanish speaking coordinator for this material and programming. And so in doing that, I've actually done some traveling. I've gone to Chile as well as Colombia to help teach this material and help out other missionaries. Just very valuable set of tools. And besides those two books, there's a lot of other material. Just about everything's been translated into Spanish. The goal of ABWE is to have these resources in all the languages that ABWE works in worldwide. Another hat I wear is my bicycle helmet. As we've shared a few times. I enjoy bicycling. I have ever since being a child. I use it to try and maintain health, but also it's an opportunity to be out with other cyclists in Iquitos that typically wouldn't be in church. And since we're inside the walls of the Institute much of the time, it gives me an opportunity to be able to make connections with people who need to hear the gospel. But as Pastor mentioned, again, those of you who get our newsletter, over the last 3.5 years, I have acquired my 4th pacemaker. Due to bicycling is when I realized something was going on, started checking out with the doctors, and again, I'm now on my 4th one, and at this point everything seems to be working well, so I'm back enjoying cycling, even though the rain around here is not as warm as it is in Iquitos. So I don't tend to get out and ride as much as I do there. Another hat that I wear is being the Peru field team leader. All of ABW missionaries serving in Peru. I'm the designated field team leader. This is our group. Almost all of us were together last year for the first time since before the pandemic. In this picture, the only ones missing are one couple that actually got COVID just before our meeting, and a single gal who was in the States on furlough. Also missing, we have several new families coming up through the system in Prefield, but this is our group serving in Peru. We have missionaries in 4 different locations, in Lima, Arequipa, up in Chiclayo, as well as where we are in Iquitos. So where we are locally in Iquitos, this is our team there, as was mentioned. On the left, Andy and Carol, and then Andy's brother John and Wendy and their 2 girls are 2nd generation missionaries. Their parents were out on the river with riverboat ministry in the earlier years, and they've returned. On the right is, actually that's Jerry, who was on the other bicycle on the video of the bridge. He's a good friend, helps us with the Institute at times. They're with a different mission organization involved with literacy. He is a 2nd generation missionary whose parents were with Wycliffe doing translation work. And so they are not so much translating, but using literacy and helping some of these tribal works out in the river have a Bible in their own language. So that covers some of our hats and what we're doing mainly. So at this point, we have time for questions. If there's no questions, I may have to bring out my Bible and give you a short Bible lesson. Since that's what I do at the Institute. So, but if there's any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Who did the tremendous bridge?
The bridge was constructed by the Peruvian government, the Ministry of Transportation. The actual plan there is to continue that bridge. That's stage 2. What's interesting is no one knows when stage 2 may start, if it does, but the idea was to continue that bridge. As I said, Iquitos is isolated, and so only river and air. There's been many ideas thrown out there how to eventually connect Iquitos by road. The closest road in the rest of the country would be 1,200 miles away. So there's a lot of jungle that could benefit from a road, but the engineering and cost so far has been prohibitive. But that road would plan to go up toward Ecuador to help with commerce in the jungle.
How big is the city?
Iquitos, physically, I believe, is smaller than Vacaville, but we have about 600,000 roughly in population. So, probably a denser population than Vacaville.
And that's surrounded by jungle?
Yes. It's out in the middle of the jungle. Iquitos was put on the map back in the days of the rubber industry. And so it's a large commercial center for that part of the jungle, but surrounded by jungle. When I get out and ride my bicycle, there has been a road in the last 20 years developed that goes 60 miles away to another river community. And just to give you the idea, the river boats traveling between those two cities would take about 8 to 10 hours, and the road is 60 miles, so an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours if you're in a bus or something.
So, the town has a hospital and they have police and they have, since you're isolated.
Yes, actually, Iquitos has centers for all the branches of military. We have Coast Guard, because Iquitos is a port, and then we have police and Army and Air Force. So that presence is there. There are several hospitals. Interestingly, in the culture, the state hospitals tend to be of the lowest quality, and a private clinic or hospital might very well be the best quality. The Seventh-day Adventists have a hospital there, and that's where most missionaries tend to go. But yes, we have medical care to a degree. Just to give you an idea, for all my pacemaker operations, I had to go to Lima. Iquitos is not set up for that type of care, so there's limited in some of the more technical things. People that we know of that have had cancer treatments also tend to go to Lima. But yes, we do have, and we're getting them all. Did I mention we have them all?
So, should we ever want to go visit, what about the crime? Is there a crime like we have here?
Probably. Crime might be a bit different, but yeah, for similar reasons. There's crimes of desperation for poverty. There's just crimes of, more and more we're getting like immigrants or refugees from Venezuela and others. And so the type of crime has changed. Even when we were on the coast, typically in Peru, you might be robbed, but very unlikely that you would be actually injured. The police are going to pursue somebody if they hurt you or if they stole something worth more than, say, $10,000. But under those, if they didn't hurt you or it's more of a petty theft, police aren't probably going to be involved. So, of late, there's been more of the more violent crimes happening. But again, it's like anywhere. There's places where you wouldn't want to be at night in most of our cities in this country. Same would be true in Peru. But for tourism, there's places that are very enjoyable to be at, and you shouldn't be concerned.
Is Spanish the primary language?
Spanish is the primary language. There are two official languages as far as the country goes, because the indigenous tribal languages in the mountains, it's referred to as Quechua, is actually listed as an official language. But in reality, Quechua is kind of like here saying Native American. And we would know that the Native American dialects were many and varied the same way. Quechua is an umbrella phrase, but as you go from mountain village to mountain village, Quechua would be different, but it's listed as an official language. Mostly Spanish though. Our ministry is in Spanish, and that's what we get by with.
Is the predominant religion Catholic in these small villages?
Yes, with the Spanish having conquered, we actually visited on the north coast the oldest Spanish mission, as far as even possibly South America. It was 500 years old when we were there, which was 10 years ago. So yes, the Spanish in conquering brought Catholicism. In many ways, it's simply a cultural layer. It's not particularly a strong belief system for many, but there are certainly devout Catholics. So, yes, the predominant religion is Catholicism. Where we are out in the jungle, when you get out on the rivers, you will find maybe more influence from the animism, spiritism, and in the mountains similarly. But in the cities, Catholicism, and then Protestant. The Protestant church is roughly 3 to 5%, depending on where you are.
Just to understand that a little better, our visa to be in the country says it is religious, non-Catholic. So that's the designation.
And government-wise, even though there's freedom of religion and not supposed to be any bias, the Catholic entities get a lot more benefits from the government than the Protestants do.
So you said you had to go to Lima. How far away is Lima from where you are?
There's about roughly seven flights a day between Iquitos and Lima on 737s, and it's an hour and 45 minutes. So San Diego to Redding, I guess, would be roughly across the jungle and the mountains.
What size is Peru compared to, let's say, the continental United States?
If you took Peru and laid it on the continental United States, I'm remembering when I did that last, north to south is roughly the Canadian border to the Mexican border, and the hump where we are out in the jungle would get as far over as, you're into Utah. So, I mean, you're putting it on the west coast, so you're covering much of the west coast. And then the hump would be out as far as, I think, Utah. So I think roughly it's a third of the continental United States in size. Now, on the other hand, Chile, our neighbor to the south, if you were to flip Chile to the northern hemisphere, it would go from south of Mexico City to Juneau, Alaska. Trivia for many, but it was interesting to me when I learned that. But it's not as wide as the state of California.
Is it
real modernized there, or is it still pretty primitive there?
Both.
Both?
If you get out in the rivers far enough away or up in the mountains, you would find communities that don't speak Spanish at all, would be living much the way they may have lived several hundred years ago. You go to Lima, or one of the other larger cities, you could pretty much find the goods and services that you would here, for the most part. So,
Are they heavy in agriculture? Because I see a lot of this in the stores.
there is a lot of agriculture. Just one brief example. If you enjoy asparagus, about 80 to 90% of the asparagus consumed in the United States comes from Peru. But that only is about 60% of the asparagus exported from Peru, because they also provide Europe's asparagus. Just a little example. There's nuts and other things as well. Rice, fish. Grapes. I believe that's about the time we have. So thank you for your questions. Again, thank you for the support that you're so faithful to give us. Very appreciated. And we will see you briefly again in the service. And then, Lord willing, the next time He allows.